questions and that. Look over the agenda. But first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this morning for our technical committee meeting. We appreciate everyone's attendance and participation. I am Michael Mills. I represent the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program and I'm currently serving as the chair of this committee. Let's go ahead and go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Eric.
Eric Ellis, Utah Lake Commission.
Scott Daly with the Division of Water Quality.
Green Project, Orem City.
Chris Kelleher, DNR.
Rebecca Adams, Grove City.
David Richards, Oreo Helix Consulting. Train Highland, Sullivan, Vineyard City.
Brendan Snyder, Linden.
Carrie Malkovich, Woodland Hills.
Ryan South, Grove City.
Clayton Wolf, Vineyard resident. Mike Rouse, Central Utah Water. Kim Struthers with Lehigh City.
Dale Fonkin with DWR in Springville. Jason Allen, Utah Lake State Park.
Okay, Sam.
Sam Brager with Utah Lake Commission.
Okay, and then we go ahead.
Sarah Carroll with Saratoga Springs.
Okay, and then sitting down right now. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jeff with Saratoga Springs.
Okay, great. Thank you for being here. I am going to send this roll around. Hopefully we have most everybody here, but just go ahead and initial by your name if you are in attendance.
If you're the committee itself, that's the front page. The back page is for visitors.
Okay. Our first item of business is to review and consider approval of the technical committee meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was back in July. Everybody had an opportunity to review those. And does anybody see any changes that need to be made? Okay, seeing no request for changes, we would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move.
All right, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All right, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from July 19th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are approved. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item number 3. Eric was hoping to have some discussion about our meeting schedule. So I guess we'll just turn it over to you, Eric.
Yeah. I think that with our governing board, we switched to quarterly to kind of add a lot of material to those and to also allow for things to be accomplished on the lake in between meetings. The thought that I had in talking with Sam and kind of figuring out how we could make technical committee as meaningful as possible was the potential to switch to a every other month meeting schedule. It would allow us to be sure that 9 times out of 10 we will have that meeting rather than on a case-by-case basis where we'll have 2 months where we don't have a meeting and then we'll have 5 in a row and then 3 months where we don't have one. It would help with the consistency of the meeting schedule. And so I wanted to run it past the committee here to see if an every other month meeting schedule would be appropriate. It doesn't mean that we can't have more when needed. Sometimes in the summertime there's a lot of things happening and regular updates are helpful and we could bump that schedule up a little bit as needed. But as a general platform, we could set it every other month so that you knew that for sure we would be planning to meet that other month schedule. Would that be helpful? Would that
Yes, that would be
increase
good.
its relevancy? That would
I
be
like
good
that
for
idea.
Jason.
Yeah.
When we first started the Utah Lake Commission, we were extremely active as a technical committee, and we had a lot going on because we were reviewing the master plan, and we were meeting, sometimes it seemed like multiple times a month. And I've always felt like this body should just stand ready to be called upon at any point. But I do recognize that we go through spells where we're meeting quite a bit and other spells where it seems like we could go 3 or 4 months without having a meeting. So with that said, I think we need to have that option to meet more frequently or on an as-needed basis But in terms of regular meetings, every other month seems to make sense.
Okay. That's what we'll plan, and I'll send out a meeting schedule for the next year that includes those dates.
Okay.
And that don't think that if one of those months comes up and there's not a merited meeting, that we'll proceed anyway because we said we would. We'll make sure that the meetings that you attend that are regularly scheduled are of value for you to attend and of value for us for you to be here. So.
Okay. All right. Any other comments about meeting schedule? Okay. Moving on to item number 4, some updates on Utah Lake issues and projects. We'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Eric, and happy to fill in as you go through this.
Great. Okay, so the lake level, right now we're down to about a 3.9 feet below full. Still, from what I can tell, plenty of water for launching boats for those that are using the lake right now. It's a select few, it seems, with the bloom still on the lake. But those that are using it are, from what I was told yesterday from Jason, are loving it more than ever because of the limited number of boats out on the lake and great water conditions.
I've been out there a little while ago and,
Yeah.
wow, it's fun.
Yeah. We have our fall field trips coming up. A number of you here are helping out with those. We're very excited about it. We had, from a student count point, something close to over 1,600 students whose schools applied to come to the fall field trips. Sadly, we only have room for more like 600 or 700. That was 15 schools that applied, 16 schools, and most of those schools have a number of 4th grade classes, and so we put together a criteria for evaluating which ones to accept to come to this fall's field trip. It'll be hosted at the Saratoga Springs City Marina that was recently revamped. They're just kind of finalizing the last few details in there. But we're really excited to have that down there, and we'll host 2 days with 12 presenters each day, packed with agendas packed for those sessions. So it should be a lot of fun. The third point, permanent wind stations for the lake. We've been working through that. Sam has done a great job of coordinating between Mesa West and the folks that have the right kind of anemometers. And we've settled on the American Fork Boat Harbor being the one location on the north end of the lake, and then Mesita Acres at milepost 13 down on the southwest side of the lake. There's a short dirt road with a little parking lot at the end of it towards the lake. UDOT has expressed an interest in having a site for weather down there for wind, and so we're hoping that we can partner with them on the remainder of the cost. The Utah Lake Commission put aside $7,000 for wind sensors on the lake. Originally, we thought that cost was going to be even lower than that, hence why we set the amount there. But after working with Mesa West, Campbell Scientific produces a anemometer with the rest of the gear that's way more long-lasting than what we had been looking at, and they strongly suggested that we go with the more long-lasting version, and they're a little more expensive. They're $4,000 to $6,000 depending on what you have available at that site. The Mesita Acres site doesn't have power, and so we'll need to have a solar panel with it. But we're excited about that because it'll be able to produce wind data as frequently as 5 minutes.
So they're open, yeah.
And so it'll be of great value to boaters out on the lake, and we'll work, once we can get those installed, we'll work on getting the data at least initially immediately available online, so that when boaters are out on the lake they can look at it online, and then Been talking with a number of entities that have apps that they've developed in their specific states to use that data so that it's an easier to use for accessibility.
Okay, we're, also we'll be integrating the data from the Provo Airport sensor, as well as we found out Utah State University owns one down on Lincoln Point. So in speaking with Mesa West, they feel confident that we can actually integrate those two existing stations to provide a more inclusive view of what the weather's going to look like around the lake now with having the American Fork and the Cedar Acre station as well. So they're pretty excited to help us develop that.
So one thing for the voters out there, the wind at that time of recording isn't as important, may not be as important as what's coming up in the next hour or two. And so we were talking with Ron, the owner of the London Marina,
Yep.
and he's a sailor, so they have the sailing app that lets you know what the wind's going to be like in an hour or two for these little microburst cells that occur. So that might be important to put on your internet access. I don't know the website, but if you contact Ron, the sailing community, then for like 2 or 3 hours into the future, they can predict whether there's going to be like, because when we were out there last week, there was a predicted at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock a 46 mile per hour wind gust coming up. And you don't want to be out there when it's 46 mile an hour microburst going on.
And when we were out, I was able to pull up the Mesa West on my phone, and you could see wind gusts into the 30s and 40s out in the Cedar Valley, and a little farther west. So that gives you some idea maybe of what's coming in.
Sure.
And the sailing community, we'll work closely with them. They're the ones that originally said it would be so helpful to have wind meters on the lake, so that if we're up on the north end and we see that the wind is starting to pick up on the south end, we either head off or look forward to a real fun ride. But it's more predictable that way. So.
I guess that's me next.
Yeah.
So you can pull it up. So, while Eric's pulling this up, the next point on there is the access points. So, during the summer, we were lucky to hire on a team of 3 interns at varying states of hire. One full-time, one other part-time, and then I'm sure we want to call the other one less part-time.
Yeah.
But with that team, we were able to accomplish quite a bit on being able to gather information about the access points. One area we realized that the public does not have the resources available is understanding how many access points there are on the lake and what they can do with those different access points and how they can get to them. So up until this point on our access points page on our website, we had a very simple page that had a Google map showing a dot where each one was located and a little bit of information about the 5 main marinas. What we did this summer was we actually, using our GoPro from the office, went and did a in-depth tour of each access point around the lake. So we did driving directions. We mounted the GoPro in a car and drove it so that people can watch a video and see where it is they're going and not just have to use a map. That video also included a tour of various shots showing what the different access points look like and what activities people can do at those access points. So now on our website, when you go to our access points page, you will see that there's a list for each one, and each access point now has, if you click on the hyperlink to name that's showing there, each one has its own dedicated page that has that video that shows how to get there and what they can do there, has a slideshow of photos showing what the access point looks like as well, has a detailed description showing what the activity looks like, or excuse me, what the access point looks like, the address, if there's a concessionaire, what kind of activities are popular at that site. And then it also provides a map as well as a link to open Google Maps directly on your phone and take you directly to that access point. Because quite often, these access points don't have an address. And so it's very helpful for people to be able to access that map and be able to take it to them without having an address to input manually in their phone. So for instance, Utah Lake State Park, like I said, it'll have the slideshow right here at the top, just a variety of photos that we went and took on varying days at the park. And then as you continue scrolling down, you'll see those bullet pointed descriptions saying what the location is, what amenities it has, if there's a concessionaire available. Continuing downwards on the page, past this list is where you'll see the Google map, where we've created an exclusive map for each site. And then that red button right beneath it is where they click to be able to open that on their phone. Or in a laptop, or on a laptop, it'll open a second page that has the location right there, and you just click directions. And then if you finish scrolling down, at the bottom there is our touring video that shows what the access point looks like. And did you click on Youth Lake State Park?
Yeah.
That's the wrong video. I better go correct that. There's a note for me. Well, when you're dealing with 27 YouTube videos, I must have put the wrong link in this one. So we're hoping, and what feedback we've received thus far on this idea of providing greater in-depth information, showing people, I mean, this is a great example of the 170 South Vineyard one, so Sullivan, I'm sure, is proud to have Vineyard going up on Utah Lake State Parks page, but I better fix that when I get back to the office. But basically, it's just a real easy clip. It's got a narration from us explaining what's going on there. So this, we hope, provides a little bit more information and background for people to be able to access the lake. It was something the interns worked really hard on. We were glad to have their help, and it's a project I couldn't have accomplished without them.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
170 South, there's probably there is some access there, but at Center Street also. Do you have both of those access?
So we have all 27 access points around the lake, including for Vineyard 170 South, Center Street, and then Vineyard Beach as well in the north end. That was part of what we wanted to have us updated, as our page was also out of date. It didn't list some of the public ones, and it also listed one or two private ones that we needed to remove.
So there's 27,
27 public access points currently on the lake.
and they're all on there?
They're all on there. There's a page for each one. So we were glad to get that up. We're hoping that we're trying to push it out on social media as well. We'll probably be doing a campaign to highlight the various pages and help people understand what those resources are like.
I had a question that was given to me the other day. If you put your boat in at one of the access points, do any of the marinas have gas for boats if they're playing all day and need to get gas someplace? Or is it only outside?
This marina
To
does.
my knowledge, I know Utah Lake State Park does, but Jason, I don't think any of the other ones do right now, do they?
No, sir, they do not.
So only...
So here at Utah Lake State Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's,
This marina has a sewer pump out and fuel. None of the other marinas have any of that.
Okay.
and that's information that will hopefully be on all these pages, and I'll be going through a review process to make sure the interns included it. Also, details like that would be available for these people to know that.
Okay.
You know, there's gasoline or not gasoline at this marina or that.
Mhm.
So it's been a great project. We're glad to have it up. I just completed the project yesterday because it takes a surprising amount of time to do 27 web pages. But I was, like I said, very grateful that interns helped and everybody else who helped us with it. So we're glad to have that up.
Nice work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm excited to have, as we slowly get the website built out, to have it a really good destination page for people to come to with whatever question they have when they come into the valley. This is where they come to figure out what they want to do on the lake, how they get there, what their options are, and when they're down there recreating. So it's getting there. We're working on making sure that it has all of the pertinent information that we could
And do we have the
include.
link on the visitor page? You know, when people are looking at the Utah County visitor page, do we have a link on there that would take them to all of this information?
I don't know specifically about that page, but that's...
Utah Valley Tourism.
It's been an ongoing effort that I reach out to different agencies. A lot of the municipalities I know have listed our website on their websites as well. But that's one. Are you talking about the Utah Valley
Convention
Visitors
Yeah.
Bureau?
Because I know
I have to double check.
a lot of people go there first when they're coming to visit.
Yeah.
So that would be maybe a key one.
It's definitely something I can verify.
Okay. Point number 5. Jason, did you want to talk a little bit about this? The
What's that?
non-motorized boat access point just outside of the park?
There's really not a whole lot to update. It's still in progress. In fact, Trent with Fire, Forestry, and State Lands is on his way down to talk about tree removal in the area. We finally have an agreement with the Mitigation Committee to transfer some funds around, and we just need to work with Utah County on
Getting a lot of the...
getting the work actually on the ground and moving. So it's progressing. It's just progressing very slowly.
Where is the end of the trail?
Can you pull up the Google map or?
It is just outside of the state park.
Oh, over here?
Yep, it's where the Provo River Trail exits.
Okay, so
Almost
right over there then?
So as
Like where
you're
the-
coming
where
into the state
it
park,
meets-
right after you cross the bridge, you turn right, and then it's immediately on your right.
Here, you'll show it up because there's actually two trails that are very close to each other,
Okay.
and this
yeah.
trailhead's right in between both of them.
Okay.
So there he is.
Currently, as you come down the Provo River Trail from any point upstream, you kind of reach the end, and there's a small parking lot, and then it just kind of runs into the state park fence out there. You could possibly go over and connect to the Skipper Bay Dyke Trail. It would take you to the north. Or a lot of people want to come into the park and use your bathroom
Where the hand is?
It's
Right
over-
there.
oh, right there.
there.
Yeah, and then if you go down that road and then to the left,
Oh.
left, other left.
Sorry.
That's the start of the Utah Lake Shoreline Trail.
Oh,
Right
right
there.
down here.
Right there.
And the trailhead actually is just back by the Provo River Trail, right there, just up a little more, is the state owns some land there. We're going to make it a multi-agency, non-motorized trailhead.
Okay. Is
So-
there any timeline on that or just?
We're just gathering funds, and Utah County Public Works has agreed to do the work. So it's kind of getting in between their road season, but before plowing, and then jumping again after plowing, but before the road season. We're kind of at their,
Okay.
to save some money and make the dollars stretch. We're kind of at their beck and call. But Utah Lake Commission has donated some funds. The Mitigation Committee that is working on the Provo River Delta project has offered some funds. Even State Lands has offered some funds. And of course, State Parks is as well.
And
Did I
the,
miss anyone else?
and the legislature appropriated some
That's right.
dollars 2 years ago, and there was a little bit of carryover this year. And thanks to the fact that we have the county and a federal agency, because there's a restriction on using any state dollars to match it, there's a pretty substantial match going into it this year, and we'll be able to put close to 30,000 of those legislative dollars into the project as
So it's
well.
planned to be pretty large.
Yeah, it's a 1.5 acre lot. If it's getting engineered right now, but preliminary, we're thinking about 80 single vehicle parking stalls
Okay.
with the CXT restroom. If we can find power and water over there still, because it's an old residence lot, we'll ultimately have all of that. We're still unclear how far the money will go this year, whether or not we'll be able to actually blacktop it completely, but it'll at least get it cleared, grubbed, and road-based. And then in the following years, we'll shoot for more funding via grants and other partners to finish it off. But I'm kind of hoping we'll be able just to knock it out in one fell swoop.
I just want to make sure I understand, so you're building basically a parking lot with a restroom facility
Yes.
for those that are either using the trail system
Correct.
or
This-
non-motorized, meaning kayaks and things like that want to come in. Will
And to-
will there be a charge to park there then?
Nope.
It will be
Nope.
free?
We'll provide an access point for the river, for kayakers who want to use the river, for the trail system. Some people who want to avoid the fees to drive into the park but are willing to pay a couple bucks to walk in can also use it. And it will actually fit really well once the Delta project gets going and completed. There will be a small trail system involved with that. And this will kind of be the hub for it, or at least one of them, I should
Yeah,
say.
one of them.
Yep.
One of them.
It will, from where the road tees there, just to the east of the state park, it will come down from Boat Harbor Drive all the way down to the existing trail right there and be fairly good size.
Yeah.
And then have a little non-motorized boat ramp going down into the river right there.
Because the plan of the Delta project is to actually put a small dam just inside the state park to separate the old channel of the Provo River from the lake. But they want to maintain the river and make it maybe an urban fishery. And it will be I think it will turn out to be very popular for kayakers, paddleboarders, and other fishermen. So,
If you get in here on your kayak, where do you get out?
Probably the same spot.
same spot.
Oh, you come back,
We've
okay.
requested a portage way to be built around the dam. They plan on installing inside the park as well, so you'll be able to get in and out inside the park. That area right there, and then
Right now, you can
where you're
go,
brave enough upstream.
you can go probably to up here
before you hit a
before you
current.
hit any downhill, so before you have any current. And so it's more like a pond. It is impacted entirely by the lake level,
Yep.
that the lower 2 miles. That's one of the reasons why the Provo River Delta is such an important thing, so that instead of this channel of stagnant water that's filled with predator fish and not much else, where all the young fish come down and get gobbled up, they'll have a gravity-fed delta that has pools and stuff, and it'll be an area where they can survive because they're diverting water high enough up that there will be a flow on that delta, and then this remaining channel just gets blocked off on both ends and becomes a community pond that's long and narrow and covered with shady trees and gorgeous. So it'll be really nice.
Yeah.
Once the Delta project is in place, there will be a place you could put in a kayak up at the top, and you could come down to here. But like Eric said, it's not going to have much current, so people could paddle back and forth.
We're excited to see it move forward. And it's nice to have multiple partners to make it work, because I don't think any one of us can make it happen, but together we're actually making it move. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. It's going to be nice.
When is that supposed to be started?
We're hoping to have some work started here in the next couple months with County Public Works, and then again next spring. There's still a lot of engineering that needs to be done and fitting into the county's timeline.
And when's the completion time?
It's open-ended. We're not sure. Depends on funds and their schedule.
I'll have Scott talk a little bit about the bloom status.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess last time we met was is that June, right? Shortly after the bloom started. There was an initial large bloom in Provo Bay. It kind of slowly spread into the lake, and then starting after about the third week or so, it just kind of transitioned from one area to the next in increasing and decreasing concentration. So it's, we'd have kind of cyclical bloom pattern. So high, low, high, low. But the main advisory that was issued first off, was in Provo Bay and then extended to the larger body of the lake. But since we've established that, since the health department issued that advisory, concentrations haven't lowered enough to be able to remove the advisory. So the lake's been under the, they call it a warning? Eric?
Warning threshold, yeah.
The warning advisory pretty much since the start of the bloom. This last week's update, last week we were out with our normal monitoring routine, collected samples at the 3 buoy sites. And it's kind of, that area has been where we've been seeing the bloom activity the most in recent weeks. Concentrations are down relative to past weeks, where total cyanobacteria counts are in the 50,000 range in each of those buoys. Our threshold for advisory is 20,000. So it seems like it's going to keep going. Looking at the satellite imagery yesterday, there looks like there's some areas of more intense blooming that are starting on the north end of the lake, but I don't think we have any data really to characterize that so far. Most of the monitoring, we have very few resources to do monitoring to characterize the bloom and the spatial extent of it. So most of what we've been doing this summer has been partnering with BYU students. Zach Andrews' lab, led by Dylan Dastrup, has been going out on a weekly basis to do their sample collection for their particular study, and they've offered to collect samples as we request. So at a minimum, they've been visiting our buoy sites, and then if they see bloom conditions elsewhere in the lake, they've been collecting samples. And then, past years we've sent harmful algal bloom response samples to the Rush Forest lab here in Orem, but they don't have the allocation to really handle those incident response samples. So we've been partnering with a lab, sending samples to a lab in Michigan called Bicotech. So we get a pretty quick turnaround, within 24 to 48 hours of those samples. This week, BYU wasn't able to go out in the lake yesterday. They typically sample on Tuesdays so that we can try to report results towards the end of the week. But with the weather and things, they chose to not go in the lake. It's a pretty nasty morning. So that's kind of where we're at. I see that this is probably really the pattern for the rest of the summer. I don't have a crystal ball, but seeing what we've seen for the summer so far, and then this is kind of September and October are typically pretty high probability months for algal blooms, so I don't really see any reason for it to shift course.
Okay.
Can you provide information on the Deer Creek algae bloom?
Uh,
That was reported?
Yeah,
see,
that,
maybe Eric has a better idea. I only hear it over the cubicle wall, so I'm probably not the best source of information. I know there's and Mike.
Yeah, I can talk about it if you want.
Mike
Go ahead.
okay, perfect.
So on the 11th, water quality employee doing E. coli sampling found an isolated area of concentrated cyanobacteria on the shore by the Island Park, or what is it called? The marina that's about 2/3 of the way up
The
the
state
reservoir.
park.
Yeah, Island Marina Resort, something like that.
Yeah.
And it tested positive for microcystin. I haven't seen results for cell count on that yet.
Toxicity concentration was at a 10 though, right?
It was greater than 10, so it maxed out the little test
Oh,
strip.
okay.
And we've been up there and tested it several times. It comes and goes, so there's not necessarily an abnormal amount of cyanobacteria in the reservoir. It's just based on where the breeze is pushing it. It tends to kind of pile up in a small area right there by the boat ramp. I just got results back today. So the next day we collected phytoplankton and toxin samples throughout the reservoir just to make sure that it wasn't a widespread issue. And there was nothing, no toxin hits and nothing abnormal. You know, the algae, the cyanobacteria levels were low. The highest number was on the upper end, which is typical, and it was around 500 cells per mil. So nothing concerning there. It was just a matter of, based on the wind, this stuff's kind of piling up in a small area, and then the wind changes and it kind of all goes away. We've had a couple of microcystin hits when it's piled up and looking green. You know, it's literally in like a 10 by 20 foot area. And then anytime when that algae is not concentrated in there, we haven't had any detection of toxins. So this is kind of ongoing. You know, as the water starts to cool down, we assume it'll go away. But it's not a widespread bloom. It's not proliferating. You know, causing these high concentrations. It's just kind of piling up on the shore there, off and on.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Scott. There was a legislative tour last week. I thought it might be of interest. The TSSD, John Shop, hosted the first portion of that, where they had some presentations by DWQ, some of the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council scientists did some presentations, and then the group was taken out on the lake. They went and looked at some of the water tributaries up on the north end by the treatment facility. Came down and looked into Provo Bay a little bit, kind of helped the legislative members understand some of the issues that Utah Lake is facing, so they could see it up close and kind of experience that. Really great attendance. And John, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Just that there's a follow-up meeting this morning with the legislative committees. That's why your forces are split.
Yeah.
I know Eric is up there to talk to the committees and answer any questions that other legislators might have. So that was with the special session the governor called. It was originally scheduled for 1:15, and now switched to 10:30. And so we'll find out how that goes, but anyway, there's representatives from the council up there.
Okay.
Hopefully, and it did go well. We had, we were on the same boat, but there were 4 boats. Only one of them went down, I think. I always worried about that. A 3-hour tour, and one of the boats was called the Minnow. So, but I think it was a positive experience, and it gave them some exposure. I was impressed with folks that aren't from the area, southern Utah and around, because they didn't have a great expectation of the lake. And I think you know, their attitudes were different after they were out on the lake, so.
Yeah, that was the big thing I heard, that people, a lot of the state senators and legislators didn't really know anything about Utah Lake. They said, what good is Utah Lake? And after that day on the lake, that they have a totally different attitude about it. I said, well, this is a pretty neat place.
Yep.
That's the same thing I heard too, was they were surprised because they just think of the lake in the negative terms, you know, whether it's the old days with Geneva or currently with the blooms, and that they were pleasantly surprised at how beautiful it was.
This whole Utah Lake Commission was formed after a tour around the lake with the elected officials.
Huh.
You know, Mayor Billings was so impressed going out there, he said, we got to do something. He started with the Utah Lake Study Group, and then it evolved into the commission. All you got to do is get them out.
Yeah.
I think the southern legislators too, politically, they were concerned that they felt like we were in conflict to some of the projects they wanted down south, like the pipeline, and we're explaining, no, that's not the situation. We're not competing for the same dollars.
Yep.
And that was to raise their level of awareness on the research and whatnot, I think was very productive.
And last year, as you know, they passed a House concurrent resolution to support projects that improved Utah Lake. And I think that this was an awesome opportunity for them that you know, maybe kind of voted like this, to go out there and go, oh, this does have merit. There is good reason for us to improve this. Look at the population base right here, and not only as a concerning factor, but also as a reason to improve this water resource. So that it was a great tour. Let's have Sam talk about communications.
Sure. So, generally speaking, on communications, we were glad to see a lot of improvements this year, this busy season, especially in particular the algae bloom. Obviously, nobody wants to see the algae bloom on here, but we were glad to see a lot of improvement on the communication about it, about commonly asked questions and how to address it, but we do realize there are still areas for improvement. For instance, I would be surprised if you all haven't heard somebody ask if the lake was still closed, which it never was at any point this year. So we're continuing to work towards finding positive solutions for those. Just yesterday, we met with a group of the public information officers here in the area. I've mentioned before in previous technical committee meetings about the media packets that we send out on a monthly basis to provide everybody with details about the upcoming events and projects going on, seasonal topics. We provide photos and links and hashtags and everything they can use to help spread the word about Utah Lake and what's going on there. So we received a lot of good feedback. Apparently it's been functioning fairly well. We've seen a lot of successes with it as well. The Utah Lake Festival and the paddleboard camp were two great events that were successful, I think, almost significantly in part due to the word being spread on social media about those efforts. We also received some really good criticism on how we can continue to improve it, to integrate more the varying interests of the different groups that we're speaking with on these issues. We also discussed some of the recreational impacts. As some of you may have heard from Eric going up to the legislative body, we estimated, I think somewhat conservatively, that there was about $1 million loss in revenue this year because of the algae bloom to the different concessionaires and the marinas. And so a lot of what we've been discussing is how can we protect the public and continue the message that's being conveyed by Division of Water Quality in Utah County, as well as help residents see the good side of the lake. So when the algae bloom is not occurring, informing them well about what they can be doing, and even if there is a bloom, to help them understand what activities they still can do at the lake or what might still be going on, and help inform them as to what the actual status is, like I mentioned before, that it's not closed currently, but that there are certain activities that aren't recommended. So it was great to have that feedback from them. We'll be continuing to do so. We're going to do our best to try and get one representative from each of the municipalities to participate, as well as from a variety of other agencies, so that we can make sure, as always, that we're meeting the various stakeholders' interests in those communications. Was there anything else you wanted me to highlight for your conversation? I think that about sums it up for today.
Awesome. Can we continue along?
Yeah, you want me to start that?
Great.
Okay. So item number 5, research implementation funding. If you turn to the second page of the agenda, Eric has taken 3 points out of the interlocal agreement that founded the Utah Lake Commission, really geared at the role of the commission and particularly the technical committee at gathering information, basically conducting research. The commission has been approached by a couple of entities that are interested in providing some funding to maybe establish a research fund, for lack of a better term, that this body would be in charge of kind of administrating. Our vision would be that people would approach us, submit proposals, and then based on the funds that were in this pocket of money, we could distribute that to conduct some research. Want to kind of build on that?
Yeah, and one of the things that we're interested in pursuing is more the implementation side of some of the research projects that are taking place on the lake as we speak. There's the Wasatch Front Regional Water Quality Council. I think regionals scratch that.
We've changed it so many times. It's Wasatch Front Water Quality Council.
Wasatch Front Water Quality Council. They're performing a lot of research. The Division of Water Quality is performing a lot of research. And we would like, the universities are, we would like to entertain projects that are more on the implementation side of that. So taking the research findings and actually developing projects on the lake to test some of these theories and ideas. I met with UVU, a group of professors at UVU just last week, and they're very interested in trying to create some of these implemented solutions on the lake. They've developed a group of professors that are both scientific and also in the business community, and they would like to see some of these ideas on the lake, and they're applying for what's called an NSF grant. But this would be the kind of thing that we would love to supplement and kind of guide that research so that it answers some of the questions. What does, the nutrient question, in addition to doing a modeling effort through the Division of Water Quality and kind of answering some of those questions, create some projects on the lake that exclude nutrient using some sort of barrier, see what it does, exclude carp, see what it does, work on some of these efforts to see what works and doesn't work in this environment down here. So we're looking for partners on that. Central Utah Water has agreed to kind of create the seed ongoing for that fund. But if our POTW partners or any of the municipalities have a desire to kind of see some of that research in action down on the lake, so that we know how to proceed forward on finding these solutions, that would be really helpful.
Well, Farron and I are putting together, starting a project for next year. We're trying to put some funds together. We'd like to work with all the guys on it. We're considering exposure studies in Provo Bay to exclude the carp.
Oh, very cool.
Several acres we want to exclude exclusions.
Okay.
And so I know DWQ, Erica Gaddis was thinking they might be wanting to do some of that stuff too. And the UVU guys sounds like they're interested in these exposure studies to exclude carp, right? Everybody's done small exposures, but we're thinking maybe a couple acres on Provo Bay to exclude the carp, and maybe getting Home Depot to donate the fencing material, just to be a community project where everybody's involved, universities, the citizens, some of the businesses and stuff like that. So Farron and I are thinking about getting that started. We'll probably have some funds from the Wasatch Front or a Quality Commission to get things rolling, but definitely we want to join everybody in this to make it one big project. So we have in that 2-acre exposure, maybe larger or smaller, but be able to do several different experiments within there. Nutrient removal, adding cattails in there, things like that. So a whole bunch of little experiments within this large exposure.
Great.
So something with everybody involved in it is what we're thinking, is getting everybody involved.
Great.
Eric, how is this different than the steering committee? Aren't they like the lead group that's deciding what research needs to be done, and then to kind of pool resources in Wasatch, water quality, Wasatch Front, water quality, regional committee council does something, DWQ does something, this new source of funding that you're suggesting does something. Are we not looking to that steering committee to direct the research on the lake so that we're not duplicating efforts and doing things that we're all in agreement would be beneficial and needed?
Yeah, and certainly there's no desire to start something that's duplicating efforts. The science panel and the steering committee is looking to answer one question. Strictly a nutrient question, how much nutrient can Utah Lake handle while maintaining recreational resources? That's kind of the sole question that it aims to answer, correct?
I think it's a little bit broader than that. I mean, we have to consider things like the carp ecology, right, and disturbing sediments and plant ecology, the whole macroinvertebrate thing that David keeps bringing up. So I think it's a broader idea because all of those things are going to impact the nutrients. And when we kind of conceived this study, we thought the science panel should be almost like the clearinghouse for any of those study designs, so that when we not only to partner on funding and make our resources go farther, but also so that when we implement a study and get to the end of it and we start considering the results and how they play into the modeling and all these other things for the nutrient scenario, we are not in a situation where we say, oh, well, we should have, if we'd have known this was going on, we would have added this particular element or tweaked the study design this way. So I think the science panel, it would be great for the science panel to have a role in all of the different studies that are going on, to be able to craft the study design, direct the funding, and I think that's the point that you're making.
That's what I'm trying.
If I may, I think from your question, one thing I want to make sure we make clear to everybody is I think what was suggested originally is that this is implementation of research. So it could also take research that was done, 2-3 years ago, but prototype it, if you will, in a way. So not necessarily new research, but implementing ideas that have been suggested that could affect the lake or improve it in some way. This fund would be more specific to that instead of new research need to be done. Does that sound right, Eric?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Because I'm not a scientist, I sometimes don't understand the difference between that of implementation research versus on-the-wall research.
I just want to make sure there's this central, my understanding is that the science panel of the water quality research group would be kind of the clearinghouse of all Utah Lake associated research and that the various funds should all try to help answer these questions. I hope that the science panel, the nutrient issue is so broad, any research project could influence the nutrient story of Utah Lake. So I just hope that this effort doesn't ignore, is set out to do its own thing, thinking that it is its own thing when it's probably somehow related to the larger effort to answer questions regarding nutrients.
No, and there will most certainly be overlap. I mean, the technical committee here has at least 6 of the representatives from the steering committee that oversees the science panel, and so there will be regular communication, determine if there's overlap. If there's overlap, funnel it through the science committee. If it's something separate, one of the examples would be Dr. Ramesh Goel, who's doing E. coli studies to figure out how to source E. coli problems on the lake. Nothing to do with nutrient per se, but a major issue. That's one of the things that is causing the lake's reputation right now, is that there's an E. coli outbreak in a small tributary north of the Linden Marina. Utah Lake is scary to be in, according to the news. And so it's figuring out some of these other issues, and there are many that aren't necessarily nutrient related that need some work done to figure out if If we have a solution, let's try it. If it works at a small scale, let's scale it. And so I don't know that the scope of this science panel was intended to be all-inclusive.
Are you suggesting that the technical committees
Act as a technical committee.
suggest what those projects would be?
Yeah.
Or what those research,
Well, or that
uh,
they might be proactive and suggest some, but we also could open it up to an RFP type scenario on an annual basis and take project proposals from our local university professors and groups like that are hoping to explore some venue and
that was kind of the approach.
vet them.
That was the original approach that we wanted to take to answer the nutrient question.
Okay.
Morphed into the Wasatch. We ought to just join the Jordan River Farmington Bay group because they're already active, and that's, so Utah County did that, and they changed their name, and then the blooms started to happen, and they got a lot of attention. So I see that there could be some benefit from research outside of the nutrient area that you're suggesting.
Well, and where nutrient-related research does pop up, and we can all make a recommendation to have that go to the science panel, right? Partner funding that way.
But the original question was, you want to get more funding, right?
Yes.
Right
I'm
now,
fairly new to this group, so within our interlocal agreement, we have members, all the cities around the lake are members of this.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, do we have a fee attached to that we are supposed to contribute?
That they do, yes.
We do? Because I never seen a bill.
At
Not
the-
that I need a bill right now, because I don't have any money for next budget year.
Administration has been paying those bills. Are you suggesting that the commission members would finance this, Eric?
Yeah.
Have you talked to the executive committee and governing board about it?
We have not brought it to the governing board. It'll be on this week's agenda, or next week,
That's
sorry.
ultimately where it's going to lie. If there's support
Next
for-
week.
yeah.
If they're supportive.
I was going to say this next meeting, and I said week.
If they're supportive of increasing their contributions for this effort, then
And that was my question too, so would it be our regular fee and then an additional fee that would be an optional fee, or just increasing our fee in general?
I expect it would be the latter. It would be something that those municipalities that were interested in kind of creating a research fund could add that on if they so chose.
Wanted to further clarify, for the municipalities, it goes to the city administration, not to like the waste treatment facility or other departments. It's handled by the administration of the city. So they're the ones getting the bill and contributing to the commission.
it'll probably be a fight since they're already members of the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council.
Agreed.
That's
And it may not be everyone. It may be just a smaller group that we can.
How much money are you planning to?
100 to 200,000 a year, something like that.
And you said that Central Utah's wanting to participate in this.
Yeah.
It might be worth
I don't know.
prior to the government board meeting, to identify some of those research pilot projects, whatever you want to call them, that fall outside of the realm of water quality, like regulations, control, long-term regulations, control, things like that, that are of interest, but wouldn't fall into the water quality.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because I think that most of them will know that they participate with the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council and assume that their research needs should be fully met through them.
You know, an example is like the Hobble Creek, Lower Hobble Creek restoration that was done kind of as a pilot for the bigger Provo River Delta project.
Was that done by this group, or was that done just by
No, that was
natural resources?
It was done on the lake, but
No,
it
but
was
I mean
done by
the-
the June Sucker
Yeah,
program.
it's the June Sucker.
So
Okay.
as the better prepared you are, because you're basically going to ask for, what, a third more money? I don't know what your annual budget is right now, but to ask for another $100,000 or $200,000 a year will increase all of their contributions by a third to a half. And then there might be some politicians that resist that.
Oh, I agree, and that's why it would be this will be an optional one. It's not going to be part of their membership contribution, but rather those that have an
So
interest in.
your proposal will be the optional one.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, or did you have any other points you wanted to make, Eric? Okay. Moving on to item number 6. Are you going to handle this one, Scott, the E. coli?
Eric asked that I talk a couple minutes about E. coli since we have a couple advisories posted around the lake, specifically the Sandy Beach area and north of Linden Marina in the mouth of Linden Drain. We've had some hits periodically through the summer with high E. coli concentrations.
There's actually also a hit right here in the inner marina.
And, right, so our recent data collected last week, we had a high value right here. So just to kind of lay the framework for you, the Division of Water Quality over the last handful of years or so has kind of been ramping up E. coli monitoring. E. coli is monitored as an indicator of potential fecal pathogens, so other bugs that can really make you sick. And the E. coli itself, it can be harmful, and we've all heard of foodborne illnesses and things like that get people sick. But with our E. coli monitoring program, we're really targeting this as an indicator of other infections that you might get. So over the last couple of years, and I thought Darren might be here today because he participates on the health advisory panel where they've been working on a sampling method to help us prioritize which areas we visit for E. coli monitoring. There's a number of factors that go into it, so high recreational use areas like beaches, well-visited water bodies, state parks, water bodies that are boated and fished, and they have a whole matrix of 15 to 20 different parameters, and then kind of rank them to see which ones are the most high priority ones to focus our monitoring resources on. So on a monthly basis, we do around, at least in the Wasatch Front area, we hit all the major beach areas of Deer Creek and Jordanelle, Utah Lake, and then up into Weber and Davis counties. And so for Utah Lake, we have kind of on and off been having hits at Sandy Beach all summer. We'll go out and we'll collect a sample. It'll be really high, and our protocol is to go back out the next day, and we'll go back out, and it's really low. And so that's kind of been flipping and flopping all summer long. Linden Drain is kind of a similar pattern. It's a little bit more consistent. So we're now starting to think about, well, what's driving the E. coli concentrations, the high concentrations? Where are they coming from? And so that's kind of what.
Can I ask a quick question while you're looking that up? Can it tell the difference? I know nothing of this. Is there a difference between animals and humans? And what you're testing is coming back as human-caused E. coli, or is there even a difference?
This is the ultimate goal of any monitoring program for E. coli. So, I'll touch on that, I promise.
Okay.
This is the Linden Drain. You can see Linden Marina there in the bottom left-hand corner. That's not really coming through in the legend very well. But the smaller the dots, the circles are the September 5th, I think, sampling, and the squares are the 14th. And, we trace this. First, we got the hits in the marina, or not in the marina, but north of the marina, and then we also test the marina just to make sure. But the idea is, where is it coming from? So we've been starting to do targeted monitoring in the Linden Drain area and Spanish Fork River area, kind of tracing it upstream a little bit to see if we can kind of get, go to this one, to get a handle on where the concentrations might be coming from. And so when we're looking at a little watershed area like this, this just shows our E. coli concentrations. It's a bit messy, but the lines that are drawn in there are all the different canals and streams that feed into that particular area. And we've traced those on ground truth those up into the watershed, basically to where they terminate and we can't follow water anymore. But when we're looking at a landscape like this, we're wondering, okay, well, what are the potential sources that are driving this? And then if we have an idea of the sources, then we compare that with how the hydrology functions, high flows, runoff events, that kind of thing. And then maybe the two of those together will give us some indication of how and when E. coli concentrations go up. So when we look at this watershed and we look at land use, off the top of our head, we think there's a couple of potential sources. Being the lake, for one, there's always waterfowl and shorebirds that could potentially contribute to E. coli concentrations. But as you move up into the watershed, we have, just south of I-15 there, we have a relatively high industrial area. So there might be something going on in there that could be driving some of the concentrations. Then as you move up into that leftmost branch, you have some agricultural activity. So there could be things like animal grazing, irrigation return flows, that kind of thing that could be contributing. And then the right branch, it kind of terminates up at the last flow we can find is right next to a housing development. So then you might start asking the questions, okay, well, what are the residential characteristics that might have E. coli associated with it? So dogs, of course, we've seen Salt Lake City have issues in certain dog park areas. None of those that we're aware of here. And then also, so the residential areas themselves, one of the predominant ones there would be failing septic tanks if folks were on a septic system, or an illicit connection of their sewer. And we do come across this periodically. Our spills coordinator now used to work with the Salt Lake County Health Department for a number of years, and he's recounting the number of times they've come across a sewer connected directly to a drainage ditch.
More than one?
More than one. So then the question is, well, what is it here in this watershed, and how do we figure that out? So we try to use our watershed characterization a little bit to be able to get at where they might be coming from. But then the idea of, and Jason just walked out. There's a new tool or technique that's employed for monitoring called microbial source tracking. And what they're able to do with some genetics work and some other different techniques, you can build a library of what certain concentrations look like. So human signature would look a different way from a cow signature, from a dog, from avian sources. And so the genetics work that is available now, you can take a sample, send it to them, and they'll use all those different markers for each of those categories and be able to tell you, okay, well, your predominant source is this, but you also have these other fractions incorporated. That work is really expensive. If you do a full suite to be able to characterize the sources that we might suspect are here, one individual sample could run north of $1,000. So it's best right now, given the funding and the tools that we have, to try to do watershed characterization type approach with synoptic events until we can try to characterize what flows and land use practices look like. Go ahead.
The cost should come down dramatically. We've got BYU guys, Zach's crew could start doing that pretty soon. Release could probably do that pretty soon too, so those costs should come down to like $100 a sample.
So the Division of Water Quality has been working with Dr. Gowell's lab for the last handful of years or so to try to develop a local method and to almost develop a lab that's a fee for service so that we can have those Utah-specific libraries built where we can take a sample to them and they can tell us. Those methods aren't totally refined. Last week we did collect some samples for him just to run as a test to see what he can provide us. And then I do know that Zach Anderud, he had a student last year that started looking at qPCR, qPCMR methods, the genetics testing to be able to get at this. My understanding talking with them over the last couple of weeks is they aren't currently investigating that right now, and it might be a discussion for the future. So that's the kind of Linden Marina area. Spanish Fork is pretty similar. Like I mentioned in the data, our sandy beach monitoring location is just barely visible up there. We always try to wade out into waist deep water, so the location changes depending on water depth. But one time we'll go out and the concentration's really high, the next time it's really low. And then on any given day that you have a higher low concentration at the beach, the Spanish Fork River at the mouth can be high or low in any combination. So we have done some monitoring up along the Spanish Fork River, well past I-15, and concentrations are all really low from that point that you see there below the legend and working upstream. And everything that we seem to be getting from the bottom of the Spanish Fork River might be highly influenced by the agricultural irrigation return flows at the bottom end of that watershed there.
My hypothesis for that is that right there where the Spanish Fork River comes in, just to the west of that, there's a bunch of cows. The guy has cattle there, and his fence was down all summer, so the cows were just waiting in the Spanish Fork River at the mouth there.
And we've noticed,
And so they're pooping, so that could be here.
we've noticed that too. And we've been out on the Sandy Beach site, and there'd be just hundreds and hundreds of birds. And then the next day there's no birds, and then okay, you have cows, and then no cows. And so okay, well what is it? Other watersheds that we've worked in with E. coli where we have flood irrigation like this, when there's not a lot of water going down that lower part of the river, so the farmers have to take turns and share the water and pass it around. And so when water runs over a flood irrigated field and is returned to the tailwater, the stuff that was on the field could have an influence to E. coli and nutrients. And I think this is one of the questions that we're concerned about with nutrients too. But one farmer might manage the field as a pasture area, which could potentially have a source of manure for E. coli. Another farmer might just be a hay crop and might not necessarily have a source of E. coli. So depending how that water rotates around might be a fluctuation of different sources. And then there's all these canal networks kind of moving west, where we've actually just started monitoring and getting pretty high hits in the canal. So it could be another source from a little farther west in the agricultural area being distributed and blown around the corner. I kind of visualize Sandy Beach as almost an eddy area in a southwest flow. You have the wind blow past that point in the Spanish Fork and maybe accumulating concentration. So, we know the issues there. We have an idea that there's a mix of sources, but we're not really sure at this point what they are. I think, it's pretty likely that the agricultural source is one of them, and then I would think that maybe the avian source.
Yeah, so one thing I suggest for the Utah Lake Commission is contact that landowner and have him put his electric fence back up as soon as possible.
How about biosolids land application that it's also being spread around the lake from multiple municipalities? Will that have an impact also?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, those are all treated, right?
But they're still class B, which is quite high.
I don't know. It's kind of news to me. I was thinking that it wouldn't be a municipality source.
Are either of those release locations?
I'm sorry?
Neither of those are release locations, right?
No. Not that I'm aware of. The point that you see, the big orange one, kind of in the bottom of the screen there, that's downstream of a pretty large poultry operation that is suspected to potentially irrigate with some of their some of the water they collect. But that's something that we're working through and contacting that individual through our AFO program. So these E. coli things can be pretty complicated and tough to track down just because of the cost of the sampling and then the unknowns of water flow. Anyway, I think that's...
Yeah, and again, back to the earlier discussion about a small fund that we have. One of the things that could be used for from an implementation solution type basis would be to gather the science that's available on E. coli distribution, and maybe it's to put together a little education packet that we can share with farmers in that area where we know that we have a regular area of concern. Distribute it and say, hey, look, here's a couple of best practices for avoiding the distribution of E. coli into our water tributaries. And a simple thing like that could have a big impact on the lake so that it's not reaching the lake, because now they install a few pond systems or some filtration systems on their tailwaters, and problem solved in that area. So those are the types of things that I had in mind. next meeting, we're gonna talk about visioning. And I would love to get more feedback from this group on where you would like, as a committee, to go with a potential funding option, or as a committee in our advisory role. That would be helpful for us to know what the desire is. I don't want to propose something and have half the group say, we don't want anything to do with that. That's not our role. You know, the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council's already taken care of that. Our goal is not to run over anybody's toes. It's to fill the gap that exists on information lag or data gaps and that type of thing.
Maybe we could just build on that right now, Eric. For agenda item number 9, that's what Eric was referring to. At our next meeting, Eric was hoping to have us all come together and maybe talk about the purpose and role of this committee going forward. Again, on the second page of the agenda, the bottom 2/3 of that are items taken out of the interlocal agreement that describe what the technical committee was originally envisioned to be tasked with. And you know, things have changed drastically over just the last 3 years on Utah Lake, with the number of groups that have gotten involved and the level of interest that is out there. And we think it's time, not necessarily to change the wording in the interlocal agreement, but for us to all get buy-in from everybody who participates in this meeting as to why are you here and what issues do you think will be important moving forward and what should we be focused on. You know, if the governing board is sending us things to look at, then that's always going to be priority number 1. But they really haven't given us much recently. There's been issues that have come up with algal blooms and Division of Water Quality's water study task force that we've been all been involved in. But we also want to be generating our own agenda too. So keep that in mind, and when we meet again, I think we're scheduled to meet in October, we'll be focusing on a vision and the purpose of the committee moving forward.
Number 7, Phragmites treatment regimes. Just wanted to let you know that we are looking right now. We work with the county invasive weed program. Our role as a commission is typically to help pull together the funding through grants for the Phragmites treatment around the lake. As we're reviewing the progress and sometimes lack thereof, we're looking for ways to be more effective in the treatment of Phragmites and maybe more strategic in where we treat and how we treat those areas. So we've been speaking with a professor at USU, and I'm not going to remember her name right now. Yeah, Corinne Hattenberg.
Kettering.
To kind of try to figure out some new and innovative ways to treat. Right now, there are certain areas that when you treat them and smash them, they do fantastic. We have very little regrowth. We have of Phragmites and great regrowth of native vegetation. Other areas, you'll treat, no native vegetation comes back. Maybe there was nothing there before, I don't know. But year after year, it still looks great. And on year 2, you have 100% regrowth of Phragmites. And that's not really what we're hoping for, right? We know that there's going to be regrowth of Phragmites forever, that it'll be a constant job. But to have it regrowing at 100% regrowth without any native vegetation, that feels like we're just spinning our wheels, and we'd like to start looking at some alternate ways, whether that's incorporating some amount of grazing. There are segments of the lake that are being really well grazed, and it looks fantastic. But figuring out a way to do that and not have cows too close to the water so that we're now creating the E. coli problem.
Goats?
What's that?
Goats?
Goat.
Right?
Same problem, right?
Same problem. More effective at getting down deep. But anyway, so as you are doing research or talking with folks, coming up with ideas for changing our regime, we're interested in maybe doing a more aggressive approach on smaller areas. So pick 1,000 acres, Provo Bay, and and Powell Slough and hit them every year for 3 years straight with chemical and smashing. And then go in on year 3 and do a replant and try to get something that's semi-aggressive or as aggressive as Phragmites may be to come back in its place and take care of one area really well and then move on. But any ideas that you have on adjusting that regime? Right now it's kind of a chemically treat and smash if we can, 1 year, and then monitor for 3 years, and then spot treat at year 3. But it seems that, as I said earlier, some areas that works great, other areas we're just seeing full regrowth. So some ideas on that would be very helpful.
A couple ideas right off top. Up in Farmington Bay, waterfowl management, they're doing lots of grazing out there to control Phragmites. You're probably in contact with them to see how that's working, right? And then the other one is, of course, trying to do some natural revegetation of the plant, so natural revegetation as well.
And real quick as an update, we are close and will likely purchase 2 Marshmasters this coming year. We got bids on them and they're a little less expensive, or quite a bit less expensive than we thought they were, with a smashing device on the back of it. And we think that will be much more effective than our land tamers have been. Land tamer went out of business a few years ago, and so finding parts and keeping them working is a pain, let alone the fact that they just don't quite get into the areas that are wet that we oftentimes want to focus our attention on. So we will, if as long as we can get those, and it looks promising, we've got quite a number of partners that are funding that. We think that we can be a lot more effective on the smashing side of things, and that'll open up the door for doing some plantings and so forth. But
one thing I've been studying Phragmites a little bit, and my concern is that Phragmites, even though we hate it as much as we can, it's better than nothing.
yeah.
So if we just smash the Phragmites and remove it, and it's bare ground for a couple of years, then that's way worse than if you have Phragmites there. Because you're getting ground, in the summer you're getting that soil heat and evaporate and dry out. And so there's lots of problems with just Phragmites compared to bare ground. Phragmites will win out. One thing, I study midges a lot. The midges love to hang out in Phragmites. The midges are extremely important to the Utah ecosystem. So if you take all the Phragmites out and there's nowhere for the adult midges to hang out, then that's a problem. So we're all totally trying to get rid of Phragmites, but bare ground for a couple of years is probably worse than that, keeping the Phragmites there. So if we manage around that, it might be a little bit beneficial.
Great.
Unless it's a recreational area where you want to have exposed sandy areas to allow people to go.
Sure.
You're talking about the
Ecological.
areas outside of where the public would be necessarily recreating.
I didn't have recreation in the back of my head. That's something I don't think about too much.
Right. Well, but your point is that it's probably best that we focus on
Sure.
because we tried some revegetation efforts that failed miserably and were very, very difficult to do. So Phragmites is better than nothing. Let's leave those areas alone, particularly if it is of no benefit to the public.
Exactly.
I think it'd be a real challenge to do anything that would really population.
Okay. Anything else about Phragmites? Okay. In the interest of time, let's go ahead and move right into number 8. Scott, I believe that's you again on the water quality study.
Okay, this should be pretty quick. Last time we talked, we had seated our steering committee, and we were just kind of we're going to gear up to bring on a professional facilitator to lead that effort. Through our procurement effort, we had to wait for our master services agreement contract to be finalized, and this is a contract that we recently developed that pre-qualifies a number of different firms for the stakeholder involvement component. And so those contracts were just barely signed last week, and now we're permitted to go out with our work plan, and hopefully that'll happen within the next couple of days. And then we're going to give them 2 weeks to respond to the RFP, and then work with Eric and the commission to select a facilitator through that contract process. So hoping soon. I'm just getting excited to get going here. It's just been pretty slow this summer, and I would like to get things going as soon as
Are
we
you
can.
aware of any firms that have expressed an interest in doing so?
Oh yeah, it's amazing what happens when people have $10 million to spend. Yeah, I get a phone call about once a week from firms that are interested in
Local?
local. Almost all of the 8 that I think are going to bid on this. Yep, so that's where we're at. Hopefully next time we meet, we're there and just getting some first meeting.
Quick update on that.
Eric has another update.
One quick update. The earlier this year we applied to the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program through National Park Service for a grant to get assistance with the trail plan around the lake. We just found out 2 days ago that we were accepted for that, and so we will be working with Brandon Stocksdale and many of the community members around the lake to work on continuing the planning, parcel identification, delineation work, and getting stakeholders and funding to the table to push that trail ahead around the shoreline of the lake. So we're super excited about that. One of our interns worked for weeks and weeks on putting together that application with our help, and we're excited that it was accepted, and we'll be in touch as we need help from all of you to get that moving ahead.
Do you have an area of focus, or do you know where you're going from here, or you just know you got the grant and then you're figuring
The
that
grant
out?
was for the entire lake, but we know that the number one priority is finishing from about here in the park all the way around to tying to the Saratoga Springs system.
And the grant isn't funding, it's their services, just to clarify. They're not giving us money, they're providing us help in planning.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of their
the trail's gonna be
forte.
planned.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're just suggesting an alignment, or?
Not suggesting, so there's an alignment already suggested. It's kind of ground truthing that alignment. It's bringing potential funding partners to the table.
Is an alignment all the way around the lake?
Yeah. Oh, if you go to our website, it's on trail map.
Trail plan.
We work with the county on finishing that. And again, it's rough. We got buy-in from all of the communities that actually have incorporated land on the lake shore to give us their updated delineation. And then the rest is more of a county delineation.
The GIS map with MAG for us with that.
And so this will be taking that to the next level, doing parcel identification, figuring out, working with landowners on their interest in allowing that to take place. Just kind of moving it to the next levels, because there's a lot of areas where it's a really rough delineation and that could be improved. And bringing funding, potential grants and so forth towards it with somebody dedicated to trail work is fantastic, as we get stretched thin sometimes.
So our Saratoga Springs planning department can probably help with that when the planning department can talk about
For
it.
sure, we're excited to have you on board.
All right, well, item number 10 are updates from committee members. Does anybody have anything they would like to share with the technical committee? Okay, any comments from members of the public?
Just two things real quick.
Okay.
On your way out, anybody who didn't sign the roll, please do make sure you do so. Committee members is the front page, back page is visitors. And I forgot, due to some of the connections with public information officers and the work we do networking around the lake, specifically for recreation on my part, we were able to secure vouchers for women's volleyball at BYU, so we just wanted to give a thank you to anybody who's here, and this is for members and for visitors as well. We always appreciate the opinions and thoughts and suggestions that you guys present. So each of these vouchers is good for 2 free tickets to any BYU women's volleyball home game. So if you're interested at all, just come up to me after the meeting, and I'd love to give you some as a thank you.
I have one
Yeah, David.
nature comment. You guys want to take a walk up on the river trail right now, put on your polarized glasses, the brown trout are starting their spawning runs up the Provo River. You look really close behind some of the rocks, there's some nice big beautiful brown trout just sitting there. So you just sit on a bench and watch a brown trout hanging out and occasionally go and grab them.
How far down?
I haven't been down here looking down here, but it's on the other side of the park going up along that little slow water.
Yeah.
When it starts getting a little bit faster water, then you can see some brown trout in different holes in those rocks. Throughout that long stretch, there's some nice brown trout just hanging in there. So they're getting ready to do their spawning run. That should be occurring next month or so.
And the river's fully open for fishing too, if you want to catch these brown trout. Yeah.
Was there an update on the dredging, and did you find a place for the material to be placed?
DFCM has all the paperwork, and we're hoping to have it all go out within the next week or two. The spoil site, we are actually going to use our small campground loop to dispose of the material.
Does that mean that that campground loop is now going to have a view?
It will mean that it'll be covered in muck for the next couple of years until we can get it a view. But yes,
But that's the plan, is to raise it up?
We're going to follow the master plan that us and Provo City created for the park and turn that into a day use facilities. The end goal.
Awesome.
So.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. We will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. We are planning to meet in October.
Yes.
Okay.
So bi-monthly after that.